Hi, everybody. Welcome to week 2 of our English 5795 course. So, we're really getting into it now. We're starting to think more about the theoretical framework that we can overlay onto this idea of location or space. And what we see in this week's readings is that there is an interplay or a tension between thinking of space or location externally and thinking of it in terms of how an individual interacts with that space or location. So we'll get more into that in a minute because I have a little mini lecture that I'm going to talk through with you guys that kind of will give you the high notes or like the key takeaways from the reading that I'm hoping everyone can coalesce around. The other thing I wanted to talk to you about in this video is your writing dig assignment, which I hope will be a fun way for us to sort of materially explore some of the ideas of not just space and location, but its connection particularly to writing. And as you'll see, our readings this week are really germane to that connection. So first, I'm going to head right over to our Canvas view, look at that writing dig assignment, kind of go over what we're doing this week in general, and then we'll get into the mini lecture. So let's get to it. Okay, so here we are in our Canvas shell. I'm going to collapse week 1, and we're going to look at week 2's schedule. Just kind of going to go over, you guys can read this on your own, but just making sure that you're watching the weekly instructor video, which you're doing right now, so high five. We've got far fewer readings this week than last week, but some of these readings are a bit longer, so just kind of heads up on that. We have an empirical study by Sanders Rio et al. Pertaining to student beliefs about writing. Now, we're not necessarily going to dive too deep into the realm of education, but I wanted you guys to have access to this study for a couple of reasons. First of all, I wanted us to be able to think about individual people's beliefs about writing. And a lot of our individual beliefs are formed in school. So reading about students is pretty relevant. But also I want you to take note of some of the methods. So we're going to be reading across genres in terms of specific subdisciplines. And what you'll see is that there are different methodologies applied in the different texts that we look at. So just a heads up about that. The Cooper piece, a short seminal piece about writing ecologies, also links nicely to Bryce, who is going to show us in his introduction to Digital Detroit some of his theoretical groundings for that book. Now, this is not a requirement, but a bonus read. Since Rice talks a lot about this piece by Desserteau, you can check it out on your own and read it for yourself. In terms of writing, we have reading response 2, the reflective discussion, and I forgot to put it here in our weekly overview, your writing dig. So I'll pop that in here. You can kind of look at the overview for like Wednesday, Friday, Sunday. P.S. I just wanted to say that y'all did really well getting your reading response done before you engaged in that reflective discussion. So just keep that up and think about the reflective discussion as a very interactive space. So as you get to know your group mates a little bit, make sure that you are keeping the ball going in that conversation. Now, what is this writing dig you speak of? Well, it's right here. And it's supposed to be a fun little assignment. If we were going to be meeting in person, I would have us bring the results, the artifacts that we unearth in our writing dig. I'd have us bring them to class, but we're not doing that. What we're going to do instead is you're going to go through the steps of this writing dig to look at a space that you write in, and then engage with some of the material artifacts of that space that indicate not only how you as a writer use the space, but what layers of meaning can you find in that particular location of writing. This might take a couple days because you might want to sort of let it present itself to you in terms of what you notice. Because often if we're so very used to a space, we might not notice things that other people might see right off the bat. Now, the way that you're going to present it to each other is you're going to engage in this as a discussion. So you'll make your chart here. Sorry, I was looking at the assignment just to see. You might have several artifacts. I want you to catalog all of those artifacts. Then I want you to talk about one in the discussion. You want your chart with all the potential artifacts and a photo of your particular artifact, or a drawing if you prefer to render it that way, into the discussion with a little bit about what it is and why you chose it as a representation of your writing process in your writing space. Definitely want to respond to 2 or 3, fellow classmates, and that will be our writing dig assignment. It should be fun. It should be a little bit enlightening, and I think it will also help us get some insight into how we as writers interact with our space when we are writing. Okay, so if you have questions about that, shoot me an email. Meantime, I'm going to head over to our Google Slides presentation and talk through our mini lecture. All right, so we're thinking about writing ourselves in and into the city in this course. And we're honing in on this idea of the individual and the surround, which is an idea that Marilyn Cooper presents in a piece. That's not the piece that I had you read, but I think it's still a really helpful concept for thinking about this concept of a writing ecology, or as Rice puts it, a network. So we're going to talk a little bit about the microsphere and mesosphere. And what I mean by that is when I am conceptualizing a writing ecology, I am drawing not just from Marilyn Cooper and Rice and others like them, but specifically I've been inspired outside of the discipline by a researcher within human development and family studies named Urie Bronfenbrenner, who put forth what is called the ecological model of human development. Now, when I was doing my PhD research, I took Bronfenbrenner's model and applied it to specifically a student's writing development. So in my mind, we can have an ecological model of human development or an ecological model of writing development. But here we're going to be cribbing all of Bronfenbrenner's terms. So if we think about an individual, a writer, situated within some concentric circles, the first and closest circle in here, indicated in green, would be the microsystem or the microsphere. And this is the individual. It's immediately where you are physically, mentally, and your immediate surroundings. So when we work on this writing dig, this is kind of what we're tapping into, is your immediate surroundings as a writer. And in relationships that occur within your immediate surroundings, so people that you're physically with. Then we move on to the mesosystem or the mesosphere, which are everyday systems that the individual you move into and you move out of. So school is a mesosystem or part of your mesosphere. Work is part of your mesosphere. You move in and out of these areas, so you become physically present, but you're not always physically present, if that makes sense. But you interact regularly with these aspects, and they kind of are a part of your microsphere or your microsystem when you're present. When you're not present, they become more part of your mesosystem, if that makes sense. Now, your exosystem would be elements that affect your individual life but aren't always a part of your everyday. So friends and neighbors, extended family who you don't see except for a couple times a year, your community health services. These are things that aren't part of your regular interaction. They don't come more regularly into your presence, into your mesosphere, but they do affect it. So your health and how your health is being cared for is a huge factor in how you exist within your meso and microspheres. And then beyond that is the macro system. So this is cultural and society level stuff that still impacts, it trickles down both to affect your exosystem, your mesosystem, and your microsystem. So the laws, the values, which government is making different pieces of legislation, that kind of thing. Okay, so we take this idea and we're going to use it to think about the readings from this week. So I hope that using Bronfenbrenner's layered systems can help us think first about this microsystem, the internal beliefs that each one of us holds about writing. Linda Adler-Kasner talks about this as principles. What are your principles for moving forward, for acting? They're guidelines. They are the framework. Sanders Rio et al. Explore this concept, which feels very fluffy and ephemeral. They explore it very empirically. And looking at self-efficacy, which might be connected to those feelings, that felt sense of ownership over your writing, confidence in your writing, and how that is different from beliefs about writing. So self-efficacy is something that we can measure and do measure often, but beliefs about writing, that gets a little more ephemeral. So their methods, as they lay them out, they're quite quantitative. They can break down on multiple levels how they're looking at student beliefs about writing. But I think what's really interesting is that their results show us that some of the most impactful elements in a person's, or in this case, a student's belief about their own writing are external, in that, audience orientation is a big piece of this puzzle. Thinking about who you're writing for, why, what is the venue that this piece of writing is going to be presented in. These are very external space and location and other person-centered elements to beliefs about one's own writing. But then there's also this idea of the recursive nature of writing, and the fact that if we believe that it is a recursive process, we can keep working on it and making it better. Okay, got to move on. We could keep going on that for a while, but let's get into Rice and his introduction from his book, Digital Detroit. So he's really honing in on Detroit as the artifact that he is analyzing in this book. He's applying Talbot's view of space as a metaphorical site of interaction. So in Rice's definition, not only is there this aspect of metaphor, but also of interaction. So there is, hearkening back to our empirical study, an idea about audience or others in this idea of the rhetoric of space and place. Interesting, eh? He draws heavily on Desserteau, as we talked about before, on Barthes, on Latour. These are foundational theorists for him as he kind of lays out both aspects of city and materiality. And I just love that this, as he's talking about aspects of rhetoric of space and place, he just sort of says that this includes many things: people, ideas, concerns, and spaces that make up a given position, concept, and place. I don't know what wouldn't fall under that category, because that pretty much sums up everything you could ever think or say about a space or a city. But I think it's going to be interesting to continue to engage with Rice and to think about how he has been looking at Detroit, and particularly buildings and spaces in Detroit, as his site for analysis. Now, one of the things that Rice really does give us in terms of this discussion about the rhetoric of space and place are two really foundational rhetorical terms and concepts, that of topoi and chora. So he separates these into a general isolated perspective that is sort of like the 20,000 foot view versus a direct and particular perspective that would be very individual and situational. Now, his key argument is going to be that the theory of network is what's going to bring together that 20,000 foot view and the particular situational view. And I think that this is going to be key because we're going to be holding in tension throughout this semester ideas about the 20,000 foot view, the large ideas of space and meaning and history, and then hold them in tension with a particular individual's interaction with that space. So this becomes really interesting when we start to think about what Marilyn Cooper brings to this discussion, because it's potato. Rice says network, Cooper says writing ecology. Now, I think you guys know which metaphor I kind of land on personally, but I think either way, we are not given a neat and tidy metaphor for how writing and rhetoric works when it is both embodied, spatial, and internal. So we've got the external and the internal always in tension. Cooper says writing is an activity through which a individual is engaged with a lot of different kinds of social systems. And so writers have to adapt. We as writers, when we're writing ourselves into or out of the city or any location or space, are interacting with variety of social, cultural constructions. We're responding to them, we're rising to meet them, we're trying to dodge them. And this is one of the key concepts for considering the rhetorics of space and place, particularly if we're going to really home in on this location of Detroit or the city. So overall, if we sort of take a summary of Cooper's article, she's tracing the history of writing theory and presenting us with this ecological model, which we could say is a synonym or a parallel. It's not the same, but it's contemporary equivalency, maybe. That's still not the word I want to use, but it parallels Rice's presentation of the network. We'll say that. She's interested in how writers interact to form systems. So things that Rice brings up about the interactive nature of topoi and chora become really relevant. Either way we go, both Rice and Cooper acknowledge that there is something dynamic within thinking about meaning in writing from an individual's perspective and when we are concerned with the rhetoric of space. So there is a lot here. I'm going to pull us to a close because I could probably talk about this all day. I'm going to pull back to our full view and close out this video. All right. So I'm looking forward to reading your responses and looking at your reflective discussions, and I'm really excited to see what you guys come up with in your writing dig assignments. All 3 of those are going to be due this week. Remember to do your reading response first. I believe the due dates that I have for that are just every Friday. Just by every Friday, make sure your reading response is written so that then you have a couple of days to engage with your group in your reflective discusussion. And it's not too early to start your writing dig. It may take you a couple of days to sort of gather all the artifacts that will be relevant. You need to make your chart and then get ready to participate in that discussion. Hopefully you can start participating in your writing dig discussion by like Saturday, because then you can have a lot of back and forth by the time everything's due on Sunday. Okay, once again, if anyone has any questions about anything I've presented here in this video, feel free to email me. Otherwise, have a great rest of your week, and I'll see you in next week's video. Bye, everybody.